start with some of the very basic premises of behavior. And I want today for us to try to think of things in the ways that we can most relate to, incorporate into our lives, and remember to put into effect. So, we're always wondering why behavior happens. Well, one of the primary reasons is because we like to go to the things we like and want to happen again. And we go away from those things we don't like and don't want to happen again. So, if that's how we relate to the world, I imagine your birds and everybody around you have those same kinds of motivations. We want what feels good or helps us have a better life, and we want to avoid or get away from those things that don't. So that's why you'll hear some of us who are talking about the concepts of behavior often say we get what we reinforce, because if we reinforce a behavior, then it's probably likely to happen again, right? So, what motivates one person or one bird or one country or one anything may not be the same for another. So, we have to remember that we all come with different sets of perspectives and experiences, and some things motivate us, some things don't. Some things work one day, sometimes the next day they don't. It's our job to figure that out, both for ourselves and for those around us, including our birds. The other thing, and this is a quote from Steve Martin, who is the founder and runs the organization called Natural Encounters, which does a lot of work with zoos and behavior. And I encourage you guys who want to be more fluent in some of the science and art of behavior to check out their website, Natural Encounters. They've got some great Zoom talks as well. But one of Steve Martin's quotes is, "The past does not equal the future." And I love that quote because it means we're not stuck. If we don't like something, or we don't, uh, it doesn't work the way our relationship is going with our bird, we can change it. I think it also means that, especially for those of us who are working with adoptions, I think it's a really important concept, because there's this misnomer sometimes that you have to get a bird at a very young age. And frankly, we don't find that to be the case. It's all about where the bird goes, not where it's been. So if they go into a situation where people understand how to support and reinforce positive behaviors, you can build a new relationship almost inevitably. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing for adoption. So, one of the handicaps often in our being able to have this discussion is labels. And I just want to bring that concept home to you, because we have to have a common way of talking to each other in this context. And if you can't see it, it's probably not something you could describe in a way that everybody agrees to. So we try to stick with the things we can actually see, not what we interpret, because again, we're interpreting things based on our experience or our behavior or our motivation. I may be motivated for, you know, Mexican food, and you may be motivated by Chinese food. So it doesn't matter. What does matter is that we find a way to have a common discussion. And so if we use negative labels, which is often the very common, and you see some listed here: hormonal, aggressive, mean, jealous, and one of the most common: doesn't like men, doesn't like women. If we use those kinds of labels, we are basically setting the bird up for limited opportunities in the future. And who wants to have limited opportunities, right? Especially if you're going to a new home or a new environment, or you just want to have a better life wherever you are. If you've been pegged to something, then you've been pigeonholed into a certain thing, a certain way, and the people around you may not think that you have other kinds of qualities that never get an opportunity to shine. So we try to avoid those negative labels, especially when a bird moves a home from one place to another. But equally potentially a problem are the positive labels. A positive label means that we have an expectation that this bird is going to be this way. It's going to be easy to get along with. It's going to like everybody. It's going to, go to anybody to ask it to. It's going to like everybody in the household. Um, while those labels may or may not be appropriate for that bird at any one given time, in this context, solving problems or learning how to reinforce specific behaviors, we want to avoid those labels because it makes it harder for us to have a discussion about what we actually see and what we actually want to see the bird do or not do. Okay, so when we get into the interactive section, I know we'll all default to some labels. So I just want to tell you now that I'm going to, call that out when that happens so that we can change our language. It's not personal at that point. It's just a matter of us finding a way to have a good, solid, focused discussion on that particular situation. But the other thing about a label, especially a negative label, is that it means that we blame the bird. And then we see this happen all the time. It's a very common thing in any relationship. If we make it somebody else's fault, then it's not our fault. And we cease to be part of that relationship or take responsibility for our part in the interaction. So it's really important that we learn how to communicate in a way about what we actually see and what we actually want to do. So let's start talking about the definition of what ABCs are. So you'll have the lingo down so that we can then put them to work in different specific situations. So A stands for antecedent. That means the thing that happens before the actual behavior. So an antecedent is just basically an opportunity, or it allows the behavior to happen. It doesn't cause the behavior. It doesn't demand the behavior. It doesn't require the behavior. It's just an opportunity. It's kind of a hard concept for sometimes for us to grasp because we keep wanting to think there's a trigger or that something made something happen. But the tool we're discussing today is the opposite. It's not the opportunity for the behavior to happen. It's what happens after the behavior. So let's talk about that in a minute as well. So opportunity is the antecedent. And then we have the actual behavior. And today we want to learn to focus on a very precise moment in time, a very specific behavior at the moment it happens. Not all the things leading up to it, not those long-winded stories that we can all get caught up in, all those reasons that we default to for why something happened. No, we want a very specific behavior. Bird bites, right? Bird screams. Bird steps up. Something very, very specific. We can hear it or see it. It's factual. And it is always the point at which we start is the behavior. And then we look at the behavior in terms of what happened before and what happened after. So it's very precise. I just want to remind you, it's not bird got jealous of my husband. Okay, that's a label. That's an interpretation. It is what bird did in the presence of the husband specifically. It's going to take us some work. We're going to work on these situations together and hopefully help you fine tune your way of looking at those kinds of situations in very concrete, more minute ways, which will really help you understand what's going on. And we call this functional analysis. Okay, then the C is the consequence. So we have A for antecedent, B for behavior, and C for consequence. And the consequence can be, anything. It can be a good or bad. It can be something we want to go towards or something we want to go away from. It always goes back to that, right? Is it something we want or something we don't want? Is it going to give us enough of a result that we're going to want to perform the behavior again? So the consequence is the key to this analysis. It is the thing in this way of looking at the science of behavior that governs whether or not that behavior will happen again. So the consequence is super important. Sometimes there's a ton of antecedents, right? There's all kinds of things in the environment, and we never know, we may never know what's in somebody's head or in our bird's head or what somebody's thinking, that maybe that thing in the environment gave that behavior opportunity. but we can look very focused at the consequence. And for those of you who, well, before we do this, I just let me know, Michelle and Cassie, if there are any questions about this basic concept of the ABCs, because if there are any questions now about that, that would be a good time to address it before we get into any further depth. So just speak up if you think there's something we need to address.
We can give it a moment and see if anyone is furiously typing a question.
Okay. Hey, what do you guys think about this green wing looking over my shoulder here, huh? That's a real bird in Brazil sitting on a branch over the sinkhole, which we had the pleasure of visiting, and brings back good memories. All right. So, if any of you want to get further into behavior and the joy of training, etc., when that behavior happens that you really like, the good behavior, you can learn to use clicker training or bridging or other things that communicates to your bird, your spouse, your employee, whatever, right? Anybody in your life that you think would benefit from having clear information about when something happens that you want to market somehow, because then you can pair that with a good reward, and that's a great way to do some training. So if those of you who want to follow on this class and actually do some training, I encourage you to look into target training and using the bridge, which can be a clicker or good or anything. It's a great way to start a positive relationship with your bird. It's a great way for you to learn to notice very detailed behaviors in your bird and recognize them at the time so that you can reinforce them or ignore them. All right. So when the consequence is positive, especially when it's paired with a reward, that reward has to have value, right? If that consequence or that reward does not have value, then the possibility of that behavior happening again is going to go down. So in the case of literally rewarding a bird, sometimes we have to pay attention to what is valuable to them. And today it may be uh, a little praise or drama, and tomorrow it might be a little piece of walnut. What is valuable one day may not be valuable the next day. So just for those of you who are going to get into some kind of training relationship with your bird, just remember that that perception by your bird can change. It's also useful that the bird doesn't know what the reward will be, because then it is more motivating to possibly to perform the behavior and possibly earn the thing you really wanted, right? If you don't know what it is, then you may be more likely to do it than if you saw, it was a piece of almond and I really don't want almond today. So just another tidbit in the behavior, in the concept of behavior and training that some of you may want to take forward and practice. So we use rewards when we want to increase behavior. We use punishment when we want to decrease behavior. And punishment, has this connotation of something terrible. We envision, some kind of corporal punishment or some terrible result. But there are really two kinds of punishment. Positive punishment means we're adding something to the environment, that hurts the bird or causes an aversive reaction. That is not something we ever recommend that you do, and definitely does not help the bird learn a positive behavior. In the science of behavior, negative punishment is when we take something out of the environment. So it's punishment because it's decreasing the behavior, but it's negative because we've taken it out of the environment. And that's not as tragic as it sounds. In some cases, it just means that we're not offering the opportunity for that reward at that moment in time, which for those of you who do enjoy training, you may notice that your birds are like, wait, tell me again how I can do this. They get more engaged again. So that's negative punishment. Some of those concepts, don't worry, that's just more for those of you who want to know more. But again, one of our mentors, Steve Martin, here's another one of his quotes I think is fabulous. It's called, he says, mistakes are an opportunity to try again with more information. If you look back at your life and you think about all the things you've learned, I bet you will realize that you have learned a lot of them the hard way. You had to make a mistake first before you got it right. And that's just life. That's the way it is, and that's okay. And so when we get more information about why it didn't work, we try again and hopefully we do better. And so that's the goal here. And I want, when we get into the interactive part of the exercises in a few minutes, we're going to make mistakes. We're all going to have ideas that may or may not be appropriate to the situation. That's okay. The goal here is to give you some tools in your toolbox so that hopefully you're not making mistakes uh, at the expense of your bird, because I've had those unfortunate situations myself, and you just, you don't want to look back and say, I wish I knew that or understood that so my bird didn't have to suffer the consequences of my mistake. But it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. But here's the goal. We want to always try to teach our bird what to do. That is the bottom line. Whenever we're trying to solve a problem, we want to try to prevent the problem, but we also want to teach the bird what we can, that we do, what we do like, what we do want to reward, what we do want to live with, what we do find comfortable for a good relationship. So it's an essential concept. If your bird is exhibiting behaviors that you find are hard to live with, it's not that you want to just stop that behavior. More importantly, you have to fill that void. You have to give them something else to do. You have to give them a way to exude that energy, that interest, that time into something that's positive. Okay, so don't forget that's really important. All right, so before we get into some of these scenarios, let's just recap what we've talked about. Okay, so antecedents, again, are an opportunity. They're not the trigger, they're not the cause. They set up the environment so that the behavior can occur, right? So you can't drive a car if you don't have a car. It's just that simple. Consequences there can be all kinds of consequences. What you want is for the consequence to be a positive one, to a positive behavior, and no value to a behavior you don't want to see repeated. So it's really important that you learn what you're doing when your bird exhibits any kind of behavior. Are you doing something to reinforce that behavior or to let the behavior die out, right? So all of that is communication. And every relationship is built on communication. So you have to get wise in your ability to communicate with your bird. Don't just wait for them to be the perfect, friendly, amiable, never does anything wrong, always does what I hope they do kind of bird, because that's not going to happen. None of us are perfect. We have to remember to reinforce what we like, not reinforce what we don't like, and take full responsibility for the relationship as well. Okay. We also need to remember not to take things for granted, as we so often do in our world. So when things go well, we need to acknowledge that with any relationship. But in the context of working with our birds, we tend to just, get into a routine where we expect, one of those dreaded words in my vocabulary, expect them to do what they always do, and then are shocked when they don't. So if we don't give some value to those behaviors we like, they might die out too. So if your bird does something, which to me is magical, if a bird's willing for me to touch it, that to me is like, I never take that for granted. That's above and beyond in any circumstance. I always acknowledge that in a positive way if that's the behavior I want to have happen, right? So when we go through these exercises, the first thing we're going to do is look at the behavior and we're going to say, is that a behavior we want to keep or a behavior we don't want to keep, and then analyze it from there. Okay. So we always start with the behavior. The other conclusion I want you to keep in mind is that a lot of times for problem behaviors, the simplest way to solve the problem is to prevent it from happening in the first place. So, if you say, oh, my bird did that thing that I didn't like, and I told my bird this or that and did this or that, well, the odds are they're going to do it again because the opportunity was still there. And you may have reinforced it just by doing your whatever, this or that. So it's a really simple way to solve a problem. Just prevent it from happening in the first place. And then, more importantly, like we were talking about teaching your bird what to do, we actually give our birds as many opportunities to perform the behaviors we like as possible. Don't you like to feel like you have choices, right? Don't you like to feel like you're empowered? So your bird feels the same way. We want to be able to give them choices that are all acceptable to us and to them. That way, we don't have to prevent the problem or try to deal with a problem that we didn't anticipate. So, giving them more choice, letting them be more empowered in the ways that we can live with, actually helps to prevent a lot of problems. So, we give them a lot of things to do that we can live with, and then there'll be less things that we don't want them to do that we have to live with. I hope that makes sense. So, everybody, forward, onward, and forward. We want to create a positive future in all our lives and in our relationships with our birds. And I think at this point, we're going to move into some situations. Nope. Yes, we are. Okay. So we're going to move into some situations and we're going to practice with some of you who volunteered. And I thank you so much for your willingness to do that. It's the best way to learn. And remember, mistakes are an opportunity to try again with more information. And I don't have all the answers either. We're going to learn together. We're going to look at situations together, and we're going to come up with the ABCs related to that situation together. So, again, I want to remind you to avoid labels. If you use labels, I will ask you to please reconsider and consider using a different term that is something we can all agree to, that we all see or hear, is factual. It's not interpretation. And please don't think that I'm judging you or this is a test in any way. If I say, wait, that's too much information, you need to take it back, be more concise. Okay. So if you find yourself getting into some story about something, then that's gone too far. It is not the context of what we're trying to do today, which is a very simple functional analysis that's looking at the antecedent and the consequence, what preceded and what followed every particular kind of behavior. And I've thrown into these situations not only bird behaviors, but some human behaviors, because sometimes if we can relate to something we do in our own lives, not just with our birds, sometimes that helps us understand how this works a little better. So it's a little bit of alternating between humans and birds, and hopefully that'll make it a little more fun for all of us. So here we go. So Cassie and Michelle are going to join for this first few, so you can kind of get the hang of how this goes. And they don't know what they're about to see. So this is the way it's going to be with everybody, and that's great. I don't even remember what they're going to see, so we're going to do this together. Okay, so we're always going to start with the B. Here's our behavior. We put money in the slot machine, or maybe if you were one of those lucky 2 people that just bought lotto tickets, you bought a lotto ticket, right? Okay, so always start with the behavior. We put money into the slot machine. That's a very short, concise way of describing a behavior that we performed. What was the antecedent or the opportunity for that behavior to occur? Want to go for it, Cassie or Michelle?
The antecedent was I had money in my hand and there was a slot machine in front of me.
Perfect. Love it. All right. What are the possible consequences? So pick one, and we'll discuss it.
Well, if I get to pick one, then I got the jackpot.
Right. I love it.
Of course.
Of course. So, how does that relate to your future behavior?
I'm putting more money in that slot machine.
There you go. There you go. Very good. And what if you didn't win? Might you still put money in?
I might try again a few times
Hmm. And why do you think that is?
because I am seeing around me that some other people are winning.
Hmm. Exactly. Because the possibility of winning is, at some point, that machine is going to let somebody win. So, right. Good. I think that pretty much covers that one. All right. Behavior. Very simple. You're on the phone, your bird screams, right? We can see it, we can hear it. That's all there is to it. What's the antecedent?
Well, that's happening to me actually right now.
I hear that.
My bird wants my attention.
Yeah, so what the antecedent is?
Uh, the bird wants my attention.
Is it? We don't know what the bird wants.
Oh, that's true. We don't know what the bird wants.
What allowed this behavior to happen? What was the environment, the opportunity that allowed this behavior to happen?
Me being on the phone and away from my bird.
And near your bird,
Hmm.
or within hearing range.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And the consequence when that happens can be many things. Just name one.
Well, he hears me talking on the phone.
No, he's
So he
screaming.
gets, yeah, he's screaming when I'm talking on the phone. So he hears me. And so even though I don't mean to, I'm giving him attention by reinforcing him.
How do you reinforce him?
He can hear me. So if he wants, if he thinks that I'm talking to him, back to him, then he'll keep screaming.
Right. Just the fact that he can hear you is a consequence. That's
Mhm.
good. Very good. I like that. What are other consequences?
Basically, not hearing me. So if I stop talking, oh no, sorry, hold on, I have to. I'm
I hear
sorry. Yeah, hold
flat.
on. I'm sorry, I have to take care of a situation really quick.
All right.
Okay, so um, I can be her tag teamer. So bird screams when I'm talking on the phone. Um, the possible consequence um, is maybe I go over to the bird and while I'm talking on the phone, thus giving the bird attention. Um, and just my going over to the bird, thinking that my coming closer might quiet down the bird. And
Yeah.
so the consequence will likely be the next time I pick up the phone and start talking on it, the bird may again start screaming because last time they did that, you know, I came over and started looking at them and giving them attention.
If we decide that this behavior is a behavior we don't want, I mean, every time we look at a behavior, we have to decide, is that a behavior we like or we don't like? And it might vary, different people have different views on that. But if you decide this is a behavior you don't want to have happen in the future, how might you prevent it?
Might go to another room,
Mm-hmm.
be out of earshot. Or before I pick up the phone, maybe I give them something to work on.
A mouth occupier, a beak occupier. Yes. I love it. That's great. Anything else on this one that you think is important?
Well, let's go to chat. Anything else, any other ideas that people have on this particular scenario? This is pretty common because it's a very natural behavior for when flock members make noise, birds often make noise as well. So any other things, let's see here. So some people are saying, yeah, you could try ignoring the bird if you don't want them to scream when you're on the phone. Yes, substitute. I love this. Substitute behaviors that are incompatible with the undesirable behavior can get you a long ways. Yes. So yes, someone else has a bird that has learned to scream when they're on the phone. Yes, and someone else says, yes, they totally go over to the bird when the bird screams. So what does that reinforce? If the bird screams and you come over all the time, chances are the bird will scream again. Spend time with the bird before the call. Turn away from the bird. Yeah, so someone else wants the example of substitute behavior for this example.
We'll probably have some of those coming up.
Keeping the mouth busy. Yes, somebody said that. So favorite treat, foraging toy, something they have to work on, occupy it. Okay, well, this is actually a good question that I think, someone asked if covering the cage is a good idea. What do you think? So someone,
not what I would recommend.
Yeah. So always think about, building trust and giving the bird something to do. What does covering the cage, does it decreases opportunities rather than presents alternative opportunities that we would like them to do, right?
Right.
Yes. So yes, substitute the behaviors that are incompatible. Exactly. Give them something to do that they cannot do, that they would do, and cannot scream while they're doing it. I don't know if anyone has I think it would be very interesting to reinforce something like whispering while you're on the phone. That might be an interesting shaping thing that would be an incompatible behavior. Working on a foraging toy would be another possibly.
And how might you shape that? You could practice being on the phone, but not really being on the phone while you're giving your bird some kind of reward or getting ahead of the problem, and practice with the bird before the actual circumstance happens. That would be great.
It's a great idea.
Whispering is always a nice alternative. And if I knew the phone was going to ring or I was going to pick up the phone, I might give that bird that beak occupier before it started, so that they didn't always make a connection between the phone and that treat. So it wasn't paired and expected in the future. Great. Next one. Hey, you stayed in a nice hotel. Sometimes these are so simple, okay? And I'm trying to make some of them so down to earth that you're not like, oh, functional analysis, that sounds horribly complicated. No, it's really not. It's really not a complicated thing to look at a very precise moment in time. So hey, what do you think, Cassie? What's the antecedent or the opportunity?
Well, I needed a place to stay.
There you go. You looked one up, you found it, you liked it. What do you think? Are you going to go back again?
I think I'll most likely go back again.
There you go. Very good. So it could work the opposite, right? You didn't enjoy it, you probably would not go back again.
Nope. Most likely not.
Okay, great. All right. Our next volunteer is Carol Medlin.
Hi there.
Hi, Carol. Welcome.
Thanks
for your willingness to participate. Carolyn lives with an adopted Phoenix Landing bird who has her moments. All right. Okay, here you go, Carol. When you walk in the door, your bird says hello or squawks. So the first question is that a behavior you like? Is that a behavior you're okay with? Or
That one's okay for me. I don't mind
it's
that.
okay.
I like it.
Okay. So what allowed that behavior to happen?
Um, my footsteps approaching the door.
Yeah. Sometimes birds are close enough that they can see or hear all those details of us entering a room or a house, right? So sometimes a bird is farther away, but they still know. So if this happens, what is the consequence? What is your response?
I say, echo, echo, hello, echo.
And it's acceptable to both of you. Both of you feel like that's a positive in your relationship.
I guess so.
Well, you might want to decide at some point if this is not a behavior you want to reinforce, because it sounds like you are reinforcing it and everybody's okay with it. So, any other thoughts on that? All right, let's try another one. Your boss says next year you can have a raise.
Okay, that's a that's a bad thing because it's not this year.
So, what is the antecedent or the opportunity?
It was probably a performance review.
Or maybe you just asked.
Oh,
"Can I
that's
have a-"
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And your boss says maybe next year. So how does that feel to you? Is that a positive or a negative?
That's a negative.
And this is when we realize that for some people maybe that's a positive. For some people who've been waiting and they finally are like, oh, I might get a raise, that might be a good thing for them. And other people are like, wow, I've been waiting so long and I'm not going to get it. So like, that's a bad thing, right? So this is when our perception of the consequence is important. How we perceive that consequence will govern whether or not we find it acceptable. In your case, you said that wasn't a good answer.
Right.
But I think it's a good example that shows how we all have different experiences and different perceptions and different motivations.
Right.
So
Right.
behavior for one person may be okay, with another person it's not. And how we choose to respond to that behavior is totally up to us. We don't always have control over the antecedent or the opportunity or the environment that's offered to us, but we can, at least, when we're the ones delivering the consequence, we do have control over how we respond, and how we respond is important.
Right.
All right. So here's a common one. I go to offer my bird a treat and it tries to bite me. So what is the antecedent or the opportunity for that situation?
My hand is approaching his beak.
Perfect. Perfect. I love your concise definition of that. And then what do you do? What's the consequence?
Um, Probably I would be jerking my hand back to avoid the bite.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting, and especially coming just after your previous example, because the bird might enjoy that excitement of the hand flying in response.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Or maybe the bird doesn't care, and so it's not an exciting consequence. I'm not sure, because we don't know this bird, right?
And even if we do know the bird, we don't know if it's trying to bite us to get us away or to bite us to see us have drama. We never know. We can speculate all we want, but we don't know what it is. If we approach the bird again and the same thing happens, then all we know is that our behavior, that's going to happen, that is the consequence. So we have to change our approach. If we don't want that behavior to happen again, we can't keep repeating the same series of events over and over again. or it will continue to happen the same way, right? So we have to change the way we approach the situation in order to solve this problem. So how might we do that?
So I might try setting the treat down to see whether, it's my hand that's triggering this. Maybe he wants the treat, he just doesn't want my hand approaching his face.
Excellent.
In one of your trainings that I thought was so excellent, speed seems to matter to birds. So maybe I slow down how quickly my hand approaches the bird's face.
Love it. Another thing we recommend sometimes to people, and I use with my very own, well, I'm trying not to use labels here. My two male macaws, let me just say, I would never try to get very close to their beaks because I know that would not be a positive interaction for me. So I give them their treats on a spoon and they pick it up off the spoon. And that makes all of us more comfortable. They're comfortable. I don't have my hand in their face. Humans coming forward, with, that's not comfortable for us. I can't imagine what it feels like to a bird, a prey animal, to have this, I'm going to get in your face. So, any way we can mitigate that reaction, which is sometimes automatic for a prey animal to protect itself or to fly away if it could, right? So, is there any other?
You're reminding me, you're just reminding me that Echo, he's very good about taking a nut out of my hand or trying, a piece of broccoli or something. But if it's smaller than, say, a flax seed or a sesame seed, he will bite my fingers. And I think it's just too small. So I don't give him something that is really small between my fingers. I make sure that it's something large enough because that seems to work for him.
That is a great observation. And I guess when the behavior happens that we don't want to happen again, we have to assess exactly like you just did, those kinds of things we can do to change how we approach the situation so that this is one of those problems that we can probably prevent rather than change the consequence, which is so much easier, right? Yeah. That's great, Carol. Any other thoughts on any of the three examples you had before we move on?
No, those were great. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you for adopting Echo, that beautiful lavender blue ringneck.
He's a beautiful bird and quite quirky, as you said, if I can use a label here for a minute.
We all have interpretations of quirky. Yeah. Some good, some not so good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your bravery in participating today. And I'm sure it helped a lot of other people for you to think out loud and try to solve a problem or reinforce a positive behavior.
Thank you, Anne.
Great. All right. Next is Christine. Is she with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Christine. All right. We're going to go into 3 more situations.
Oh boy.
All right. This is a real basic one, a human one. You stop at the red light. What was the opportunity for you to do that?
I'm assuming the light turned red.
There you go. See? And then what are the consequences?
I don't get a ticket. Nobody gets hurt.
There you go. It's very motivating, isn't it? To stop at the red light if you think it will keep you from dying. It's very motivating. So those are the kind of motivations we look for in working with our birds. Highly motivating reasons to perform the behaviors we're asking them to perform. So, of course, we're not expecting them to perform behaviors in order to avoid dying, but you get the idea. Okay, here's the next one. Your bird flaps while on a hanging gym. So I guess the first question is, do you find this to be a positive behavior?
Gosh, it depends, because I have heard that bird flapping could be they're trying to posture for you in a mating kind of way, but I'm thinking if it's happening on a hanging gym, that it's just exercise. So I think I'd be happy if Sierra would actually exercise. So yeah,
There you
we'll be good with this.
All right. So because you're good with it, that means you want to present the opportunity for it to happen, right? Which
Mhm.
means having a hanging gym is
Absolutely.
the environment. So when you see it happen, what do you do? What would be the consequence for you or for the bird? You know, you're both experiencing the consequence.
Yes. I think I would say, yay, Sierra. And she would probably love that. She loves verbal praise.
That is fantastic. You know, I came up with this one because at one point my two macaws were flapping like crazy on their hanging atom and all the paper went flying everywhere. And so my immediate reaction was like, no, because I'm thinking I have to clean up the paper. And then I'm like, time out. This is great. This is exercise. This is every reason why I put an atom up in the first place. But, you know, sometimes we have to look at why we do what we do and if we're reinforcing what we intend to reinforce or not. So, you know, just thinking it through is very helpful sometimes. So that's great. Yeah, I would praise, and maybe even if a bird did not have a lot of exercise up until that point and needed to get better at it and know that it was really a valuable behavior, I might pair it with another reward as well, whatever it took. And then at some point, perhaps that bird is going to find that flapping is in and of itself valuable to them without us. We call that a self reinforcing behavior, so that they do it for the sake of their own joy and they don't need us to respond anymore. That's a wonderful thing when that happens, that a bird finds a behavior that we think is positive is also positive to them. So, all right, here's another one. And I did this one specifically for you.
This is something we definitely want. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you knew that you wanted to train your bird to go into a carrier.
Yes.
So how did you start? What was the opportunity for that behavior to occur?
Having the travel carrier present in the bird room and also having a bridge, a fun bouncy bridge between her cage and the carrier so that she would be able to get to it easily and to always have the doors open all the time. But then I admit I did kind of lure her in by putting her all-time favoriteest thing in the world, which is an almond.
So that was the consequence.
Yes,
So,
that was the consequence of going in there. But yeah, I had everything ready so that if she happened to wander in, she could.
right. And did you have to make the consequence of her going towards the carrier in smaller increments? Or did you wait for her to go all the way, which is really hard?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes. There was a couple of almond trails here and there. There was first teaching her, then getting on a bouncy bridge was okay. What I mean by bouncy bridge, it was a one of those rope spring bridges things, but I'm not sure she'd ever been on something like that before, so there was a lot of drama involved there. So there was a lot of breaking down of the steps. First, just putting the cage in the room. When she first saw it, she started screaming. So I knew travel carriers were not a good thing.
So that is a whole nother behavior, right?
Mhm.
Bird screams when it sees the carrier.
Mhm.
So how the antecedent or the opportunity was having the carrier in sight, what was the consequence that changed her reaction to that?
I sat there quietly with her and let her scream and scream and scream, and I did not move. And she stared at and she looked at me. I kind of think she was expecting me to do something. And since I knew that this was not putting her into any kind of danger, because her cage was closed, she was merely seeing it and it was on the far side of the room. I let her kind of sit there with it. And then she realized after a while it wasn't moving closer and I wasn't responding to her. And it was loud and she looked at it and just said, oh, okay, too much drama. If I had felt that she was in any way in danger, I might have removed the cage, but it was on the other side of the room and it was a matter of her just looking at it.
So, at what point did you start a new behavior? Did you leave the carrier in the room or did you take it away?
I left the carrier in the room, but she got almonds when she got quiet.
Okay, so you waited until she got quiet.
Mm.
Excellent.
It
Because,
didn't take very long, as long as I didn't freak out. Every time she screams, she looks at me for a reaction.
mhm.
So as long as I didn't move at all, then I think that confused her because I think she expected that I would run to the cage. And then
Right.
once she got quiet, she got a bit of an almond. She picked up on that
So,
very quickly.
if the consequence had been she screams at the carrier and you take the carrier out of the room, what do you think would be her reaction the next time you brought it in?
Oh, she would have screamed because she would have known if she screamed, the carrier would go away.
Exactly.
Now, fortunately, all she did was scream.
Okay.
If she had started hitting her head against the cage or something, if she had done anything that was going to injure herself, then I would have had to rethink the whole thing and say, okay, we really got to break this down even more. But since she was just sitting there screaming and she wasn't in danger, then I thought, well, let's see how long this takes. And as long as I didn't respond to it, I think she was disappointed and she got quiet and then she got an almond.
Very good. So I hope everybody understood that Chris did not reward the behavior of screaming. She waited until there was no screaming before she gave the reward. That's really important. Because if we go back to like the situation of being on the phone, a lot of people will go, "It's okay, honey," or they'll, "Here, just have an almond until I finish this conversation," or whatever. And in the process, they are actually reinforcing that behavior and making it stronger. So it was excellent work on your part to wait until you could offer the reward for the behavior you wanted, not the behavior you were trying to stop. So that was excellent. Good job. You're a good trainer. We're all learning the hard way, though, aren't we?
I did have noise reduction headphones on, if that helps. I'm not kidding.
Always come in handy a lot of times. Yes,
Made it easier to wait her out.
it does. It does. It does because we can't really control our innate responses sometimes, especially if we're getting hurt by noise or bites or whatever. So that was also very wise on your part. So thank you for doing such a good job. Ian is fostering and hopefully will adopt a little severe macaw who came with a lot of challenges, but she's, I think, flourishing as far as I can see, thanks to your determination to learn and give her a better life, positive things to do. So thank you for that. All right. Next up is Tamara.
Hello.
Hi, Tamara.
Hi.
Tamara's joining us from Tennessee, where she's adopted 3 delightful Phoenix Landing birds, for which we are very grateful to her. All right, Tamara. 4. Yeah, well, your daughter adopted 1 and you adopted 3. This is all right. Here we go. Some of us see this happen all the time, right? You're in the grocery store and the kids screaming, "Give me this, give me this, give me this," right? So, what's the opportunity for that to happen?
I took them to the store.
Exactly. Took them into the store. And then what are the possible consequences?
We leave the store with no candy.
Yes. Yes. A lot of times we see people, yelling at their children and then eventually giving in. What does that do?
That just reinforces the screaming the next time.
Exactly. Exactly. And I bet we've all had that experience. I always want to go up to that parent and say, Don't give in. It'll just get worse next time. Stand by. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Okay. So your husband walks in the room and a bird screams. Have you actually had this happen?
As soon as my husband pulls into the driveway, they all start screaming because he walks straight in and gives them treats. So he has reinforced some bad behavior.
Oh no, Tamara. All right. All right. So the antecedent, the opportunity for this is that of course you live in your house, husband walks in a room, bird screams. So the consequence, what are the possible consequences? I mean, well, let me back up. First of all, we always need to ask ourselves this question: is this behavior something we want to reinforce or to have go away?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely, we want it to go away. Okay. So that means that
Need to train our husband better.
There you go. It's kind of hard to prevent this problem because your husband lives in the house, right? So we can only change the consequences in this case. So, and we don't know why the bird screams, right? The bird could be screaming for all kinds of reasons. Hi, hello, give me the treat, whatever it is. We don't know. But all we do know is that there's enough value to that bird that they're willing to repeat the behavior again. And, there's always this question about natural behaviors versus learned behaviors. And, there are some behaviors that are somewhat natural that we may or may not be able to train otherwise. A bird being noisy at some point in their day is a given. Whether it happens at this moment in time is the question. So, what are the possible consequences that could happen that either change or reinforce this behavior?
With Stewie, especially when she screams for my attention, I go and shut the bird's door and she is quiet. She knows that she's not going to get the attention when she screams. With this situation, my husband, as soon as he walks in and they scream, he goes straight in to give all three of them a treat. So he encourages the behavior.
Yeah, pretty strongly, I'd say at this point. So I guess the question might be, how can we train the husband, right?
Right.
What alternative behavior could you give your husband so that he didn't reinforce that screaming at that very moment? Even a delay of some few seconds or minutes can change this bird's behavior completely. So I wonder if there's a way you can derail him to a different behavior first so he doesn't automatically reinforce it.
Probably not.
Probably.
The dogs are the same way. They get a treat too that's like automatic, and we've learned to deal with it. They're quiet as soon as they get the treat. So
I guess you're going to have to decide that this is a positive behavior that you're willing to live with, and that's
yes.
okay too.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's good. All right. Let's go on to the next one. Your bird loves your food. So unfortunately, this opportunity doesn't happen for enough birds, but what is the opportunity or antecedent?
That I made the food for them.
Perfect. And gave yeah. And then what are the consequences when they dive into the food?
That I continue to make it.
Did they all like it from the beginning? Did you ever have a bird that didn't necessarily? Maybe dive was a bad word on my part. Your bird starts to eat or, dabbles. Dabbles.
We were told that Stewie never ate pellets, and I kept trying different pellets until I found some that she liked, and so that was our positive consequence, to find something that she would eat.
So you change the antecedent, you change the pellet, you change the opportunity to a different kind of opportunity. Mm-hmm. There are some birds who don't like what we want them to eat, so sometimes we have to find a way to make it valuable or pair it with something more valuable. So what kinds of things could that be maybe?
I try to give a variety of everything and keep changing things up so that they get different things all the time, and I find different things that they like all the time.
That's great. That's great. And some birds are
Even the texture, like some of them like it in chunks and some of them like it like mash. So even the texture I make different because some of them like it different. So sometimes they eat it more than others and that sort of thing.
I love that. See, that's a different antecedent too, which is excellent for different birds. Different presentation matters. Yeah. Or some birds may need the consequence to be that you were eating something at the same time, maybe, and showing them that it was okay, or praising them when they put their food into the bowl. Or I like to use condiments, I call them, on top of some foods, little sprinkles of little things that I know they like, that will cause them to want to eat more of what I've given them, making it a valuable experience for them. But eating good food is often a problem for some birds. As we know, a lot of them come with verbiage that they don't like this or that. And it's our job to then teach them how to eat good food and not just say, but he likes cake, he likes popcorn, he likes, crappy seed, whatever. So that's good. Thank you, Tamara. You do such a great job.
Thank you.
All right. Carly.
Hi. How are you?
Welcome, Carly. Carly's one of our caretakers at the landing, and she has recently joined us and is taking care of a lot of male cockatoos. Need I say more? All right.
Yes.
Here you go, Carly. This one's pretty easy. We've talked about it already, but what's the antecedent to this situation?
The antecedent is that I was driving and the light turned red.
Perfect. And you didn't stop, and what could happen?
Couple things could happen. I could get into an accident. I could get pulled over, get a ticket, or nothing could happen.
Right. So would you say that the consequences motivate you to stop at the red light?
Yes, definitely, because those are positive punishments or neutral or nothing. There's no
Consequences. Yes.
Well, I guess one could argue that if I get away with it, I maybe get somewhere, a quarter of a second faster. But in general, there is no positive consequence, really.
There you go. All right. Okay, here's a bird behavior. The bird lunges at you as you walk by.
So the antecedent is that I walked by, clearly. I know that seems obvious, but.
Walked by close enough that they felt the need to lunge for whatever reason, right?
Yes.
And so is this a behavior we want to reinforce or to extinguish?
We do not want to see this behavior, or I don't, at least.
I agree. So what are the possible ways to change the opportunity or the antecedent? If this is a behavior we don't want to have happen, oftentimes we go back to the antecedent and just try to prevent the problem in the first place.
Right. So I would kind of look more closely at how I'm walking by or where I am walking, and alter that antecedent in the first place. Don't give that opportunity, I guess. Because this is,
it might vary by bird. Some would lunge and some wouldn't, and maybe learning.
Definitely, yeah. It's situational, right? I mean, a lot of birds, if you walk too close to their cage, they might, we use the label territorial, but just meaning essentially that we see that behavior if somebody approaches too close to the cage or if we walk too quickly. There are a lot of things that you can change about how and where and when you're walking by. So just noticing those things and trying to alter how I walk by or when or where, I think.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so think about what the possible consequences are. Maybe not the way you would do it, but think about all the ways anybody might respond to the situation, because there are a lot of people who might respond differently than you would.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
help our listeners think about what are the different ways people might respond to this.
So I think that it's really hard not to give a reaction, right?
Right.
It could it could scare you. It could make you kind of jump a little bit. And I mean, of course, I've been guilty of this, and especially with, well, that's labeled again, but I was going to say with male cockatoos, but with any bird, that kind of drama might be exciting. So I think it's important not to try your best not to give any kind of response or reward that could be positive.
Yeah. And
Or
learn from that and change your future behavior.
Definitely.
Well, in this
Definitely.
case, we're not changing the bird's future behavior. We don't have to change the bird's future behavior if we change our behavior and avoid the situation in the first place.
Exactly. And I think someone left a good comment. I'm trying to read it now about, I missed it. Where is it? But something about maybe dropping a treat when you walk by before that even happens, so that you could maybe shape that behavior differently.
Good.
Which may or may not work, but it's a good thought, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to just keep tinkering with our behavior to see what either allows or doesn't allow a behavior to happen, or either reinforces or doesn't reinforce a behavior once it does happen. And that is describing this analysis as the scientific approach, but some of that is art as well. We have to be creative in our thinking about how we can teach a bird to do something differently or change our behavior in a way that's modified, that we didn't think outside the box a little bit sometimes. So all we know is that when that behavior happened, the bird found it valuable for some reason. We can speculate all we want, but we know that bird found that behavior valuable in that circumstance. So if we don't want that behavior to happen again, we have to change the circumstance or our response. So I keep saying the same thing over and over, but in different ways. But I hope it helps people kind of understand the concepts. We're here. Okay, so let's go on to another one, Carly. So you turn maybe some people don't know that are listening, but sometimes birds are motivated to take a bath when they hear the vacuum cleaner, because it sounds like this roar of the rainforest, and they immediately go dive into the water bowl or whatever water feature you have going. So do we consider this a positive behavior?
I do consider this a very positive behavior. We have a Moluccan cockatoo on site, Jazz, who does this every time I start vacuuming down there. To the point where sometimes he doesn't really like to be misted or showered with a hose. So if I feel like I would, I think that he maybe needs a bath, I will sometimes start vacuuming. So, the consequences are just really that the bird has fun and they get, well, we think that maybe like they're having fun. I know that's a label, but that they get clean and that we get to clean our space. So,
yeah. In fact, I think if you encounter the situation and you find the bird finds this motivating, then you know that in the future you can provide whatever it is that makes for a better experience, maybe a bigger bowl or a better the bowl in a different situation, or, you can even enhance the opportunity to make it even a more positive experience. So,
It's funny you say that, Anne, actually, because I have offered him like a larger tub when I started vacuuming, and he has yet to use it, but he looks at it. So I think I'll keep offering and see, different days, different rewards, or I forget how you phrased it, but the past is
does not equal the future,
yes,
right?
yes, that's it.
In this case, it's become what we call a self-reinforcing behavior. Again, he's found that this experience is a positive one that he enjoys, whether or not you're here or doing anything. It's the consequence of just getting wet or having fun or whatever he finds motivating, but he enjoys it. And so for those of you who've had trouble with your birds getting a bath, which they definitely need, here's a new idea if you haven't tried it with the vacuum cleaner. So thank you for that, Carly. I'm glad to know that Jasmine finds that like a positive experience.
Oh yes, he splashes it everywhere when I start vacuuming.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so Sheila is with us for the next 3. Is Sheila here?
I'm working on trying to unmute her.
I wasn't sure if I had gone into a black hole.
Hello.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi,
Welcome.
you disconnected for a second for some reason.
Our friendly internet Zoom world is full of challenges sometimes. All right, here's 3 for you, Sheila. Here's the first one. You like your mom's pot roast, or
I sure did.
So, I think this is an important one because something is good, we don't always acknowledge it. But what do you do in a circumstance like this in order to have this positive experience again?
Say, Mom, I love your pot roast.
Exactly. Just that simple. But how many of you out there made dinner for somebody and nobody told you it was good, or they enjoyed it, or can we do this again, or, it didn't give any value to the situation. So I saw that happen in my childhood a lot. Something didn't get made again if it didn't get recognized. So there you go. All right. Your bird bites your hand when you try to pick them up. Let's start with, do we want this behavior to happen?
No.
Right. So what are the possible opportunities or antecedents that gave this behavior a chance to occur?
Well, I wanted to pick them up for some reason, and I put out my hand.
There you go. There you go. And you probably saw a little body language along the way.
Probably did.
Probably did. So how could you change the antecedent so that this behavior did not happen and avoid this problem?
Well, two ways. One would be to analyze better whether this is a good time. Do they want to be picked up right now? Or if I have to pick them up for some reason, then use a perch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, or I guess there's some other antecedents. A perch is always a good thing to teach a bird to step on. We try to do that at the adoption centers. I think that's a great skill for a bird to have. Or, of course, there's always the option of not picking them up at all, which sometimes we have to do, even though it's not what we want to live with. Or maybe we learn to pair it with some kind of reward or beak occupier at the same time, right? So in order for this not to be reinforcing to the bird, what are the possible consequences? It's hard when somebody's trying to bite you, right?
Right, and you're rewarding them by not picking them up. So
yeah, because they don't want to be picked up. Exactly.
Yeah,
Right. And that's what I'm trying to come
that's a real life scenario for me, Anne. Um,
Good.
I think it's you have to deal with the antecedent. If the bird is biting you, they obviously don't want to be picked up that way. I think I would, if I needed to pick them up for some reason, as opposed to it being a kind of optional thing, I would use the perch and then reward them for getting on the perch. But I think if I, just wanted to pick them up to hang out or something, and they're saying no, I have to accept no.
Hmm. Well done, Sheila, because you hit it right exactly. The bird bit you, and you basically rewarded it by not picking them up, which is what they were trying to tell you with a big exclamation point in the first place, right? But we don't have any choice in that matter because we're not going to willingly be bitten like crazy, right? But hard for us sometimes to realize that they asked us, they didn't want us to do something, and by virtue of not doing it, that's exactly what they wanted. And so I'm sorry that could have come out a little more coherently, but I think you understand what I'm saying. But very good. All right, let's go to the next one. I realize we're running out of time here. Your bird eats everything but the broccoli. So the antecedent is clearly that they had broccoli,
Well,
but
you
how did
want your bird to eat broccoli, but you have a bird that eats everything but broccoli.
they? So how can you change the antecedent or the opportunity so that maybe they do eat the broccoli?
Well, I would never make anybody eat broccoli. I mean, if your bird is eating kale and green beans and carrots, everything but broccoli, why are you trying to make them eat broccoli?
Well done again. Thank you. That's very clever. Yes, true. I guess what was in my mind creating this scenario was that there's different ways to present it so that maybe it does become a positive.
I guess if you had your heart set on their eating broccoli, you could put something else on top of it that they like, maybe put a little bit of millet on the broccoli floret a little bit at a time, make it more appealing.
Hmm.
But I would say worry about other things.
That's good. I like that. Well, just so everybody knows, broccoli is one of those few vegetables that you can pulse really small, like in a Cuisinart or something, and it doesn't get mushy. So you can make it so fine that they don't even know it's part of whatever you've stirred it into. A lot of things you do that in the Cuisinart and they just turn to mush, so they're yucky. But broccoli and carrots hold up pretty well. So sometimes it's about presentation, right? And how we present it, or maybe we go, broccoli's great, and they go, yeah, I want some too, right? So sometimes change if it's something we really want them to do, sometimes changing the way we present it can make it more uh, likely to happen.
And sometimes they'll eat something out of your hand that they wouldn't eat in their dish.
Exactly. Well done. Well done. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila.
And
Are we
um,
running out of time?
well, we are running out of time, but I also just want to say, because we've gotten a lot of questions that people have had about biting. So I'm wondering if, and we just had one, of course, about biting, but just talk if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about biting and using the ABCs and stuff about how to analyze this, because it looks like we've got a lot of people who've stuck with us that have had issues with birds flying to them, or biting their husbands, other people in the house.
I was looking to see. I could go scroll down to maybe one of the other ABCs. Do you and Cassie want to come back online and we can talk about those together instead of continuing to scroll through? Because it sounds like that's what we mostly want to talk about right now, huh?
Yeah.
Time is biting.
And it's a common issue that people have. And someone even asked, like, what is a good consequence, or what should you do if you are bitten?
Mm-hmm. Um, like this is a situation where a bird wants to bite somebody or tries to bite somebody during a situation. Mhm. And I think that is pretty common when a bird is confined in a cage and has no escape and feels very trapped and unempowered. And
Now you're
sometimes
using
we feel like,
labels.
well, just let me do it. Yeah. Unempowered is a label. Trapped is a label.
Yes.
Trapped, can't get out. Definitively cannot get out. Has no power. Um, and when they feel like they have no power, that can change the dynamic for sure. I know it does for us as humans, right? So how let's take this one as a biting and then we can take it into a broader scale. How might we change this so that the bird doesn't feel the need to chase us and potentially bite us? Because sometimes biting is, to me, the best way to stop biting is to prevent it, which means changing the situation before we get to the bite. Because once the bite happens, the bird did it because they had no other way to communicate. They felt like they told us in every other way. They were uncomfortable. They didn't want it. Don't push it. Don't come near me. Whatever body language you were seeing. And you did it anyway. So you deserve that bite, frankly. I don't really feel sorry for you. You need to take responsibility, back up so the bird is also comfortable and change your approach somehow, right? So how might we do that in this situation?
Okay, so we're putting the food bowls at the door, and the bird is biting me when I get to the door, or like when I put the food bowl in the door. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, like wants to come bite you because, get out of my space or whatever's going on in their head.
So if that were the case, if I am putting the food bowl in a specific place, then I would change the environment. I would change I would not give them the opportunity to do that to me. So I would probably change my behavior and find a different spot to put the food bowl.
Mhm.
Or I could have the bird station in another spot or have somebody help me.
Mhm.
And have them and have the bird be in another location when I put the food in. So I'm rearranging the environment so that they don't have the opportunity to bite me, so that we don't have to get to that point of biting.
Love it. Or maybe I'd give the bird a treat, like you say, station at the other end of the cage. Give them a beak occupier, a treat, something to keep their mouth full while I quickly do something at the other end of the cage.
Right, Michelle, didn't you say you gave Pippin some pumpkin bread at one end of the cage while you put the bowl in at the other? So
Yes.
that would be a great idea.
Give him something alternative to do, because that exact situation would happen when the bird that Cassie adopted was here at the adoption center. So I would give him a behavior that he could not do simultaneously with lunging, which was I would start by giving him a nice big piece of pumpkin bread, which he seemed to love because it was greater interest to him to eat that pumpkin bread than to go over to where the food bowl door is and lunge at me. So that was something incompatible that gave him to do as an alternative. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to I want to skip to one that Jen Baldwin was going to work with us, because this is another biting situation that was specific to her that doesn't hurt to talk about either. And again, this is not a behavior that we want to happen. So I think we can all agree on that. This is a no-brainer. So the easiest way to solve this problem, in my opinion, is to prevent it. And so how might we prevent it?
So this is another Pippin one right here. So yeah, I can put Pippin in all of these. So when I first met Pippin, I didn't really know a whole lot about him. And I was playing with him. I got him really excited, and he flew at my face and bit me. So I totally said, that is totally my fault. I got him overworked, and he didn't, in my opinion, didn't know what to do with all that energy, and he bit me. So I'm going to change my behavior so that he doesn't get to that excited state. So I'm going to make sure that if I don't want him to fly at my face, I'm not going to repeat that behavior that I had just done. Like, get him excited, get him to the point where he's so excited that he flies at me.
Excited being one of those interpretive labels, of course.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how can we prevent this from happening? How
could I prevent it from happening?
What is one simple way that people can prevent this from happening? It's not always the favorite approach, but what's one real easy way to prevent this problem?
Walk away. Like, you could walk away from the bird.
Well, they come pretty fast. I've had them come at my face pretty fast. You can clip their wings, which is not anything. We don't really encourage that anymore, but a bird that's flying at faces and biting them, that might be one option to prevent this behavior, right?
And another might be, of course, again, that changing the antecedent. Maybe starting out with the bird is someplace where they cannot fly at your face to bite. Maybe if you are going to enter a certain room, you're going to keep them in the cage until you are in that room, and then give them something else to do and encourage that instead of the flying at your face to bite. Mm-hmm. Maybe a special toy to work on.
And there are a lot of
yeah.
A lot of people are flying birds these days, and every now and then they start to fly in ways that, like, at to your top of your head, or at you or towards you in a way that you don't want. And I know a lot of people who just lean over and prevent the landing as an option. Prevent the behavior from happening.
Right. So changing our behavior.
Right.
To not allow that behavior.
Are there other not allow that, exactly. So in all you said you saw a lot of things about biting in the chat and Q&A. Are there some that we should address specifically?
There's some, of course, it seems like flying to people and biting is a common one. So this is a good scenario. Another one that's come up is between birds, how to diffuse birds that want to, or change it, birds that want to fly at each other in battle.
Go for it. What do you think?
Well, I know if we do an ABC, if we look at the something in the environment is enabling that from happening, right? So my first go-to is trying to see if I can change something in the environment so that there is a more desirable thing for them to do, go to, an activity for them to, and reward them for that. And sometimes it's even, I'm just trying to think through this. So you can also go back, and if you're doing a real training approach, shaping a different behavior so that they will do something instead of going towards the other bird when the bird enters the room. And by what I mean by that is, say, maybe one bird is in a cage and another bird enters the room with someone for just 2 minutes. And if you have two people participating in this, they both get treats just for seeing each other and remaining, kind of calm and not going to the other. And then gradually increasing that amount of time so that there is some positive, they get good things for doing something other than flying at that other bird. That's just a very simplified possible thing of trying to shape and encourage an alternative behavior to that flying at each other.
Do you find, Michelle, because you live with, quite a few, more than a handful of birds in the same room, do you find that it helps that they each know something specific is theirs in terms of when they're out of their cage, that they have their own unique places? Does that help?
I'm not sure if that helps or not, but I do think having multiple places for them to go. So there are plenty. It's not just that each bird has one place that they can go, but there are several places that each bird could be at any given time. So there are already choices out there that there are more places for the birds to go than there are birds. More things set up, which in from my perspective with environmental enrichment gives them, some choices. They're not limited in choices just on, there's still multiple things for them to choose that doesn't involve, chasing another bird out of that space.
And don't you find, I think we find it in the adoption centers to some extent, that when there are multiple birds, multiple cages, that sometimes the proximity of one cage to another can be an issue. So we have to be attentive to the body language at that point as to whether or not we're making one of the birds uncomfortable because they feel encroached upon or whatever causes them discomfort. I don't want to speculate, but clearly they're uncomfortable. So giving more personal privacy space can be helpful as well, right?
Absolutely. That's something I think that we learned from Pam Clark over a decade ago. She talked a lot about having spaces between cages and also just monitoring it's not enough to say move slowly around birds. It is more like every step you take, look at their body language. And even if you are 10 feet away from a bird, if the bird seems to be looking at you and starts to lean back, you've come too close. That 10 feet is too close. In that moment, that one moment, maybe you're BFFs, and in another 15 minutes they're going to want you to be right there with them, but in that moment you're too close. Just watching that body language.
That goes back to the beginning concepts of going towards something we want and away from something we don't, and us taking responsibility for the perception of our bird's body language, which is often very clear in that regard. And we tend to sometimes ignore it and push on when we shouldn't.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
someone else also talked about chasing feet. Yes, and that is a common one that we get too. So what's a common way to try to change that behavior? Birds chasing feet. Yeah, you've got one.
That was going to be our next one after the broccoli. Exactly. Yeah.
Your bird is on the floor, so and your feet are moving. So if your bird is on the floor and your feet moving causes him to chase your feet, then I would not give him that opportunity and find a space that would be more appealing, like on a perch, and have like a favorite toy or some snacks, and give him another opportunity that is not on the floor and chasing your feet.
Yeah,
Exactly. So easy, right? And yet we see all those YouTube videos where the birds are chasing feet and people are laughing and making that behavior stronger and letting it happen so that they can say, "Oh, I got my husband. Look at that." Yeah. So, yeah, none of that helps.
And again, it's that whole changing the environment thing. And does a great job at the adoption center setting up a higher table. If a bird wants to run around on a space and have lots of stuff to chew and do, that can be on a table. That's not on the floor. They can't chase unless you're dancing on the table, but then that's another thing. So
I tell you, if you have a cockatoo, that's the most important advice I can give you, to teach independence in a separate space where there's lots of things to do. Don't let them depend on you for everything. Yeah.
Great.
Any other bite issues? I know we've gone over here, but we definitely want to help anybody that needs help. So
I think we've got talking about maybe some like a favorite person. Like one person is giving attention to the bird and it likes that person. And so there might be some um, like mate issues, like a bird perceiving another human as a mate.
And everybody else must go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So solve that problem by not performing mate behaviors that make that more challenging. That would be a good start, right? I guess the question is, does everybody know what those mate behaviors look like? Those kind of sexy come-ons that we give our birds without realizing it, when they say, scratch my, under my wing right there, or here, let me give you my dinner. Let me put my tail in the air and show you what I got. On and on it goes, right? So it's hard to stop when we feel this connection to another creature and the magic of birds. And wow, this bird loves me. But we have to be careful that we don't become the mate versus the friend or the provider, which is our role. Because you ain't making babies.
Yes, absolutely. But then it's still kind of back to ABCs, right? So also like what is happening in the environment? How can you change it if somebody is getting bitten? How can you encourage other alternative behaviors that are incompatible with, flying at and biting the other person? So of course, I mean, and this is one of those things where we can't go through every scenario, but the hope is that by looking at this, what is the behavior? What is the consequence? What happened in the environment that enabled that some changes can happen to help, give you the tools to think through. And because everyone here has the power to decrease the negative behaviors in their home from their bird, their dog, their spouse, their kids, and encourage other alternative, desirable behaviors.
Call back in about 15 minutes.
I don't know who that is.
I'm in the middle of a.
Yeah. So cool. So the conclusions, you want to take it away, Anne?
Yes. Okay.
Bring us home.
So bring us home. Okay. Every time a behavior happens, look at it in the most concise, minimal way you can. Describe it with things you can only see or hear, not what you interpret. Decide if you like that behavior or not. If you like it, give it value. If you don't like it, either change the environment that gave the behavior the opportunity to occur, or change how you respond to it. And remember, you can change things. There is a possibility to have a new set of behaviors. So don't give up. Be empowered. Give your bird opportunities to be empowered, and try to always aim for the positive. And thanks for caring about behavior and trying to make a better life for your bird. It's a good thing.
Yes, thank you all for sticking with us and joining us today and spending your Sunday this way. I hope you'll join us again for some other classes as well and talks. We have a self-paced class that touches on lots of different topics that starts back up again in February. We also have in February some great guest speakers. We have another talk on behavior with Debbie Foster. Can we ever learn enough about behavior? No. So I encourage you to come for that as well. And we also have Dr. Beth Ryan talking with us in February about poop. So, and she's also going to talk about some good cleaners and disinfectants that are bird safe that we can use in our homes as well. But also good to know what our veterinarians are looking for in poop and why it's important for us to monitor it as well. So I hope so glad you joined us here today. And a special thanks and applause to all the volunteers that were willing to be unmuted and talk through those scenarios, and as well as those of you who were, we didn't even get to all of the folks that had volunteered, and I appreciate that, that we had more people willing to talk through things with us. And we look forward to seeing you all again at another educational talk. We always learn something. We always learn something in these talks as well. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.